Like, how do you build that? I believe you actively have to plant the seeds of self-love. You need to teach your children to find things that make them feel good.
We know what it's like to hold multiple truths at once, to live in that scientific evidence, and also to love somebody so fiercely that the usual advice is impossibly inadequate.
I know, even if somebody is an adult or a child is taking these medications, they aren't the end-all cure-all. You still need these lifestyle habits. You still
100%.
need to work on self-love. You still need a family culture
Yes.
that's supportive and
Yes.
caring and non-stigmatizing.
Yes, right. You're listening to Solving for Joy. I'm your host, Dr. Chrissy Ott, a multi-boarded integrative physician and professional certified life and career coach. This podcast is about joy, what it means, how we find it, and the creative ways people are solving for it in their own lives. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, friends, and welcome to today's episode of Solving for Joy. I never expected to write publicly about my own family's experience with childhood obesity, and yet doing so has opened a door to conversations I did not even realize I was longing for. One of the people who reached out after that piece was published is Jill Castle, a pediatric dietitian and author whose work immediately resonated with me. Jill has spent decades helping families find their way out of shame and confusion around food and weight into a more grounded, compassionate approach to nourishment. Her book, Kids Thrive at Every Size, is an incredible resource for parents and families and professionals who want to support both their child's health and their child's spirit at the same time. So, as a mom and a doctor, and for you, Jill, as a mom and a dietitian, we know what it's like to hold multiple truths at once, to live in that scientific evidence, and also to love somebody so fiercely that the usual advice is impossibly inadequate. So we are going to talk about that middle space today, the messy, human, complicated places where parents live when a kiddo's body doesn't neatly fit into the narrative of our culture or some of our growth curves, and how to support them without shame. So thank you for being here with me. Welcome.
And for offering this conversation, which I think is a really important one, wherever it may go. Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see where it goes. And because, this is the Solving for Joy podcast, I am going to ask you to tap in to what is bringing you joy right now and share that with our listeners. Where is joy feeding you in your work and life today?
So two main areas, I would say. Number one, my own clients and patients that I work with, and just connecting with them on a regular basis every single week and taking them through a journey to help them feel more connected with their child, feel more purposeful and confident in how they are feeding and nourishing and moving and all kinds of different things that they do with their families. But watching the transformation of them, of parents and caretakers becoming more confident and happy, and then the inevitable result of watching their children just blossom as a result of their confidence and knowledge. And so that's one area.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second area would be just writing a little bit differently and on different topics than I have spent my entire career doing. So that's bringing me a little bit of joy in that I'm feeling pulled to it, which is really fun as a writer or as a communicator. I don't even really like the word writer. As a communicator, to feel very drawn to communicating thoughts and ideas that are living in my head and putting them down on paper a little bit, albeit selfishly, but also hopefully tying it to the benefit of others as well.
Absolutely. As you were speaking, I could feel like that creative impulse of both head and heart together. Like, this is what's my gift to give in the world, and to give it is a joy.
Mm-hmm.
And to have it
Yes.
be so authentically called forth, and to have the expertise and lived experience to communicate about it so that it can be a benefit for as many people as possible.
Mm. Yeah.
That's so wonderful. This may be a little bit out of order, but I'm wanting to invite you to just share a little bit about how you currently work with families and
Mm.
patients around building that confidence, because I don't know that everybody understands that this type of service is available in the field.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I work in private practice, and this is my third iteration of a private practice, and I've sort of changed it over the years to fit what I believe is a model that actually works for families and gets them
Mhm.
into a better place. And so on a lot of levels, you could call me sort of a parent coach in a way,
Mhm.
because I'm not
Mhm.
really doing medical nutrition therapy where, I'm using insurance and things of that nature. I am working with families on a 3 to 6 month basis. I work with them every week, and we work on what they and I together have decided are their goals. And oftentimes, families are struggling with a child who might be growing up in a larger body, who might be growing up in a smaller body, who have developed eating habits that are concerning and worrisome for the family, who may also, the family itself may be just struggling with their way they're connecting, the way they're communicating. And so my work is really trying to help them, of course, bring, you know, nutritious foods into their children's lives and overcome whatever barriers and obstacles that they're dealing with, but also facilitating cohesiveness and communication and the attitudes and beliefs that I think for lots of kids need to be actively cultivated, and helping families understand that some of these attitudes and beliefs are contrary to what they are seeing on social media, in the news, in the magazines, what they might be hearing from other healthcare providers or teachers or adults that are influencing their children's lives. Trying to help them understand that some of these messages and some of these sort of social norms are quite harmful to their children, and helping them understand that it doesn't have to be that way, that there are different ways to think about things and different ways to promote health and promote well-being that rides sort of counter to what we've been brought up to believe is the way to go about it.
Yes, I am struck by how many different skills you're bringing to bear in supporting them, because, of course, addressing attitudes and beliefs is far more than sharing accurate portion sizes and macro and micronutrient information, which, of
Correct.
course, like, backfills the information that you offer.
Mm-hmm.
Is absolutely necessary, but absolutely not sufficient to walk people across the bridge of not knowing what to do to feeling confident about how to
Mm-hmm.
respond.
Right. Right. Of course, my training is in pediatric nutrition. I've spent 35 years working in this field, but I'm also a mom and have raised 4 children. And I've seen all of their friends, and I've seen just like lots of behaviors and beliefs
Yeah,
and just, after 35 years, not that I'm, you know, the end all be all, but I've observed a lot of things, and I've seen a lot of things work and a lot of things not work. And I have sort of the experience to be able to go a little bit deeper, help
yeah,
families recognize the child that they are raising, not the social norm child that we're supposed to be, achieving. And
yeah.
that oftentimes for families looks very different, right? Every child is different.
So true. hmm And those stories stay with us for so many years in so many cases. So
Hmm.
intervening with a loving intervention during childhood can make such a long lasting difference. I imagine, one of the things that I shared in the article was how my own expertise as somebody with, this human nutrition and food science degree, just like a dietitian, and being a pediatrician for a couple of decades, did not adequately prepare me to support my own child in ideal ways. I was still stuck for a long time. That expertise met with reality in a way that was very humbling and opened my eyes and has inspired me to step further into the space of being part of the solution, even with, ongoing humility around there's so much I still want to learn and so many ways we can offer people that help. How was it for you as a parent with such depth of expertise? Did you trip through this whole parenting thing without a hiccup, or were there
Not
tricky
at all.
times even for you, Jill?
I did not sail through parenthood. Actually, my very first child was quite, being a parent to her was quite humbling. And at the time I had her, I'd been a pediatric dietitian for 7 years. I'd worked at Mass General Hospital where I did my training. I worked, I was a clinical dietitian there, and then was at Children's Hospital in Boston and a nutrition support dietitian. So my level of, expertise and intensity in these
Very
very
high.
busy, was very high.
Mhm.
And I was very good at my job. And then I had my first child, and we did okay the first year. When we started solids, things started to unravel. And at her 18-month checkup, she was underweight. And at her 1 year appointment, she was riding on the 5th percentile. At her 18-month appointment, she was anemic. And that really rocked my world. At her 1 year appointment, I was like, oh, I can get her to gain weight. I know how to get kids to gain weight. This is something I can do. And I wasn't very successful. And then when she was diagnosed with anemia, that just floored me. And, looking back on it, it was really just a blessing in a lot of ways, because I was so focused on her diet and getting her to eat all the right foods for weight gain, and, eventually then trying to get her to eat iron-rich foods. And the reality was the root of her problem, and my problem, more importantly, was just the dynamic that was happening between us as I tried to feed her. I was pushing and pressuring and trying to get her to take more bites and keeping her in the high chair to finish her meal, and all of that doesn't work with children. And it was a real comeuppance for me, very humbling from the very beginning. But it definitely took my career down this path of, oh my goodness, I learned very early on, there's so much more than just food and nutrients here. There's just this whole other aspect of how we adults interact with children. And that was the start of my journey into what I would describe as, the what, how, and why of feeding children. It's important to know what to feed them, obviously, but the how we do it and why they behave the way they do and why we behave the way we do is also very important part of the
Yes, there is
recipe.
this sort of magical way of almost it's akin to unfocusing your eyes and not looking straight at the problem slash not problem issue of feeding, so that you are strategically disinterested in the volume of food that they eat,
Yeah.
and strategically unimpressed with their, preferences. Like, oh, you don't like that today.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very hard, though, for parents to do,
So
because
so hard.
oftentimes we feel like we're doing well as a parent when our children are eating well. They're
Yes.
picking the right foods, they're eating the right amounts, they're not
Oh,
overdoing it, they're
yes.
not
Oh, yes.
underdoing it.
We
And
can really pat ourselves on the back when it's going
yes,
well.
yes, yes, yes. So, yeah. And so, I had a typical picky eater, a developmentally appropriate picky eater. And I pushed too hard and turned her off. And so that's really why she wasn't eating. And so I learned that, no pressure, zero pressure. And that's how the other three of my children were raised. And I also learned that, my firstborn has a temperament that's, I would say, spirited, somewhat intense, and that showed up at a very early age. And I learned that I needed to give her some control. Like, I couldn't hold all the control. Like, I needed to give her some autonomy. And that honestly works for just about every child anyways. But when you have a spirited child, they definitely want to be part of the answer. They want more information. They want to be part of everything that's going on, part of the decision making. And when we
They
don't
want
allow
agency,
that, right,
self-determination. How
exactly,
reasonable.
yes. But if we don't allow that, then they respond with their behavior. And so it can really become quite a dynamic.
Yes. As a primary care pediatrician for many years, I can still call to mind multiple families with a child who was not gaining weight at the predicted rate, or who had, feeding resistance of this type or the other, picky or aversive or, whatever. And even as the pediatrician who has the background in feeding and nutrition, it is really hard to convey and communicate that information. I often, of course, would rely on Ellen Satter's message about the division of responsibility. And for listeners who aren't familiar, Ellen Satter is a well-known dietitian and author who largely permeated the culture of feeding children with this concept that it's the adult's responsibility to decide what and when with food, and the child decides if and how much. And I'm really curious about your take on this as a child growing up in a larger body whose satiety signals have had a hard time coming online. I hypothesize that there is something missing in the division of responsibility model that might not take into consideration phenotypic presentations of hyperphagia. I wonder what you think about that.
Well, I do think a lot about food approach. I don't know if you are familiar with that, but it is sort of genetic. It's genetic appetitive traits, appetite traits we are born with. And a child can have food approach tendencies, which are aligned with eating more, being more interested in food, reactive to food, responsive to food. Sometimes we call that food responsiveness. And it's just a hard wiring within the child. And that's how I explain it to families. It's like your child has brown hair and your other child has blonde hair. It's hardwired. It's part of the gene pool. So these appetite traits are part of the gene pool. There's another one called satiety responsiveness. Children are very responsive to their level of fullness, or, and you see it manifested in their slowing down of eating. They're saying they're not finishing their plate of food that you've put in front of them. They're full. They get full faster. They're sensitive to it. They react to it and slow down and stop eating before they're done. Now, when parents don't understand that these are traits that are built into children, and, there's no testing that we can do to say, oh, your child's food responsive and your child's satiety responsive, but we can watch behaviors and sort of, not necessarily label these kids, this is what you are and we've diagnosed you, but sort of put the picture together and make a notation that, when parents come to me and say, every time my child goes to a party, they are the one who never leaves the buffet. They are the one that keeps eating, even when they couldn't possibly be hungry for more food. They just keep eating. They don't have a stop button. These are the children that might be food responsive. And so these children don't do well in food abundant environments without guardrails, without the support from the adults in their lives to help them navigate those environments. And, it's really hard for families who have to deal with this, because it's not like they can control the school. They can't control the birthday party. They can't control the coffee and donuts after church, right? But oftentimes what they can do is sort of set their home environment up to be more helpful and supportive to that child. So they might not leave food on the counters, right? Because these are the kids that don't walk by the cookies on the plate that's sitting on the counters. They want to have one. And then they're going to walk by again and take another one, and walk by again and try and take another one. And so getting back to the Ellen Satter division of responsibility, which I think is a really good way for parents to understand their job and to respect the job of the child. I think we also have to acknowledge that, the propensity to carry excess body fat is also genetic. So there could be within children genetic tendencies that are going to promote, as you said, hyperphagia or overeating. For those who are listening that might not understand what that word is, but overeating, an overhungriness, or an over preoccupation with food. There's some genetic components to that I think that we underserve our patients when we don't acknowledge that there could be a bigger, broader picture here, that yes, some things we have control over, but other things we may not have control over.
Thank you for diving into that. It is so tricky to hold space with guardrails that does not involve emotional harm, that does not involve shaming. And when you have, I don't have two children, I have only one child, but plenty of folks have two kids where it looks like the rules are different, or the application of suggestions around eating are different. And, from one perspective, appropriately so, because you have a food approach, food responsive child and a satiety responsive child in your household. But emotionally, it's really harmful for one to get, one set of rules and the other to get another set of rules. So ultimately, as a physician and as a parent approaching this increasingly important issue in our culture, where, childhood obesity is on the rise along with adult obesity, and framing it as a medical condition, not a moral situation or a failure of, self-restraint, acknowledging a genetic contribution, acknowledging the landscape of highly processed, you know, very palatable foods that are designed to make us eat more than we need, without offering a ton of nutrients. I want to work towards liberation and find language that supports that. I want to broaden the space where we can say, you don't have to have any kind of feeling about your body other than loving it and appreciating it. And we can also want to improve your health by reducing your fat mass. And it's so tricky for adults. And then it's many times trickier to hold that space lovingly, supportively for children. So I'm excited to feel into how do you guide people who are wanting to thread that needle so carefully?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my, part of the book that you, thankfully, thank you for showing that earlier, part of where that came from was my own discomfort with how we as healthcare providers how we were threading that needle, because I feel like if we can't thread the needle, how are we helping parents thread the needle if we can't do it ourselves? And so one of the things I sort of dove into in this book is this whole philosophy that the medical community does have a philosophy of fix size. Like if the size isn't what is perceived to be healthy or perceived to be the social norm, we need to fix it. We either help children lose weight, we help them gain weight, and we do that in a variety of ways, but mostly with children. We're embracing healthy habits, right? Habits that we know work. And this is we talked about this, I think, before, Chrissy, where, I'm talking the platform. I'm not talking sort of severe levels of excess body fat that are really causing medical problems like prediabetes, like cardiovascular disease. I'm talking about the child who is carrying extra body fat, but we're not seeing yet any changes in their metabolic health. We might be seeing some changes in their psychological health because of their size. We might be seeing some changes in their physical health because perhaps they're not sleeping well because they have apnea, or it's painful to move, so they're not able to move as much. But when we're talking about fixed size, unfortunately, our society views even 5 or 10 extra pounds of weight as detrimental. And in children, it may not be, right? You're a pediatrician. You know that might not be the case. And then we have another philosophy, which is embrace size. Let's not do harm. Let's embrace this child as is. Let's not do anything to change their size. And let's focus on healthy habits. And these two can feel like they're opposing philosophies. And this is where sort of my idea for the book came about, because I really was feeling that tension between the two. I want kids to be healthy, physically healthy, metabolically healthy, and I also want them to be psychologically healthy. So how do we get all of that in one approach? And for me, what spoke to me was the fact that both sides embrace health habits. Both sides look at lifestyle behaviors as a key component to health and happiness, right? We have an abundant amount of research behind the role of sleep and the role of movement and the role of nutritious foods and the role of minimal screen time, and just these habits that are daily living habits that produce healthy outcomes, like health, physically, metabolically healthy outcomes, but they also promote emotional and psychological well-being. And so that's what sort of spurred my approach when I work with these families. I'm working on all these different elements. We're working on sleep patterns that are productive. We're working on self-love. Like, how do you build that? You actively, in today's world, I believe you actively have to plant the seeds of self-love. You need to teach your children to journal. You need to teach your children to find things that make them feel good. You need to restrain from making comments about other people's bodies. You need to not make comments about your own body, and especially not comments about your child's body. And
Yes.
I have to tell my clients, do not speak about food and eating and bodies at the one time during the day you're together with your child, and that's family dinner oftentimes. Don't make table talk about bodies and healthy food and toxic food, and that's not planting the seeds of self-love. It really can stigmatize a child and make them feel less than.
I feel the truth of those words, and I want to take a moment to tell folks about the 10 pillars of wellness, which are really it's the structure and the scaffolding of this wonderful book. But family culture comes first, and we never ever put something first on accident. So family culture is first, and sleep is second. Movement, feeding, which we've addressed a little bit, actually eating, food itself, screens and media, and then finally, again, we don't ever close with something on accident, is self-love.
Yeah.
I love the fact that all those are there. And I think it is separate from fixed size. Even though I have seen that some fixed size oriented approaches end up making some of those other things easier.
Yeah.
But pulling ourselves back from being face planted in and blinders on with a fixed size approach is, gosh, it's so important.
Well, and I'm sure you've worked with parents and caretakers over the years that have experienced their own trauma. I will say the word trauma around their childhood and going to Weight Watchers as a 8-year-old and, being told your whole life that nobody will ever love you because you're too big. I mean, these are traumatic things that people don't shed lightly. And oftentimes when adults have had these experiences as children, and then they have their own children, it's very confronting to have to, work through some of those very, very painful memories and challenges. And so some of the families that I work with are these are the experiences of the parents, and they come and they say, there's a problem, or there's a pediatrician has told us we have a problem with our child, or I can see my child going down this unhealthy path. I want to help them, but oh my goodness, I have this history myself. I have no idea how to do this because I was harmed, and I do not want to harm my child.
Yes. I'm so glad that you're naming that, because this work is so healing for the parents and caregivers too. Just this past weekend, I was sitting next to a friend at a meal. I was sharing with her that I'm, entering the practice of weight management medicine. I almost am looking for another way to even title it, right? Because I don't really want to keep calling it obesity medicine, but weight responsive medicine or something like that. Anyway, she lived in a household where she was the average sized child, and her sister carried excess weight. And her sister was harmed in the ways that you imagine and described just now. And as a result, that sister's child got no guardrails, but still came genetically with a food responsive, expression of self, and is now living in a very large body, with some serious medical challenges. And it has some unnecessary suffering because that harmed parent was not willing to investigate a middle way and was not able to access healing around those harms. So stopping the cycle is, it's such a service.
Yeah. I think it's, yeah. I oftentimes will say to parents who I'm working with for 6 months, there's no guarantee that, first thing I say is, if you're looking for a weight loss relationship with me, that is not my goal. That's not my approach, and that's not my goal. My goal is to help you understand the child that you have and adjust your parenting and your feeding to bring out the healthiest and happiest version of your child you can. Oftentimes, because we are putting together or revamping or initiating habits that these families haven't put into place before or have gotten off track with, things move in a positive direction on both trajectories, healthiness and
Yeah.
happiness. But we never have to talk about weight loss. We don't do weighing. We don't do a calorie controlled diet. We just do what's right for the child that they have, the age and conditions of the child that they have. And things move in a better place.
This is maybe a little bit of a risky question, but as I am, a prescriber who is stepping into this space, one of my perspectives, and it's informed by my role as a parent, is that my own child, who's very food responsive and has ADHD with some, impulse control and, all the things, executive function that go along with that diagnosis, I found that prescription interventions that interrupt the neuro gut axis of propensity toward excess feeding have been liberating, have really taken the internal pressure off of my child. And again, it's a sticky wicket. It's a bit of a hard needle to thread because I never want her to feel wrong in her body. And yet intervening with this for me I am viewing it at this time in my, lived life experience as a relief to her that has made it actually possible to approach the healthy habits that are available. So I'm wondering if you often see families who are also working with a prescriber, if you have sort of a flashing yellow light, or if you have an inclusive, sense about this question, as we are in a moment where more, weight medicine specialists will be prescribing phentermine and phentermine topiramate and GLP-1s for kiddos.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a horse in that race. Like, I don't want to say,
You're like, I'm over here in my lane.
well, I'm over there in my lane. And I would never say to a family, you shouldn't do that, or you should do that. To me, it feels like that is such a personal decision for a family. And I know in my heart that no family takes that decision lightly. And I feel like my role is not to judge or help make a decision one way or the other, but to really support families in whatever mode that they choose and feel is best for their child. Because I know, even if, somebody is an adult or a child is taking these medications, they aren't the end all cure all. You still need these lifestyle habits. You still
100%.
need to work on self-love. You still need a family culture that's supportive and caring and non-stigmatizing.
Right.
You still need to move your body. You still need a good night's sleep. Like, to me, that's my job. That piece of it is my job. My job is not to encourage or discourage one way or the other. It's what is what is. And I care about that child. Like, to me, I want that child to feel good in their body. I want them to be happy. I want them to be healthy. I want them living and thriving in the world.
Yes.
And I want the parent to feel good about it too.
Sometimes I can imagine, that we see a child who is now thriving in the world, who is more healthy in their body, who is more happy in their body, who has also reduced their excess weight. And our brains, who really like to simplify things, can just focus on the lost weight without stopping along the way to say, and they're sleeping better, and they're taking more social risks, and they are moving differently and more flexibly on the softball field, or whatever the activity might be. I am seeing my own child in her journey taking more social risks, feeling pleased with herself, and engaging in more supportive habits as the excess weight that she was carrying reduces. So I think that they are related, but I am also really interested in restraining myself from placing all of that as a binary relationship to weight as the only factor, because it's not.
Right. No, and I think, as much as our society has pushed us with this idea that thin is perfection and you're only valuable if you are thin, I also think the opposite or a counter danger could be that, portraying GLP-1 medications without supportive lifestyles as the answer as well. And I think that could be a slippery slope as well.
Very problematic, because we know that stopping the medication results in, a large amount of weight gain if those healthy habits are not very, very clearly established, and loss of muscle mass. And, I could go down and get into the weeds, but I won't.
I do like to emphasize to families that, when all is said and done at the end of the day, whether your child, because a lot of families are afraid of whether their child will be on this for the rest of their lives. And there's a good chance they won't be, right? Because that's a long time. And, you've heard the, the big question mark is what is, long-term exposure? What does that look like down the road, right? And so that I do feel that, there's always this place for lifestyle intervention. It might not be the primary thing that will get a person with excess body fat to a better place. It might not do that for them. It might not be powerful enough to, reduce somebody who carries a large amount of excess body fat. Lifestyle behaviors may not turn that around, right? For some people it does, but it might not for others. And that's why I still believe that, there is a role for lifestyle behaviors, because it's not just about weight. It's, it helps you feel confident. It helps you feel rested. It helps you, sleep, helps you process your emotions, right? There are just so many things. I mean, we know there's some really good evidence around adequate sleep and appetite regulation and social emotional processing and mental health, right? And so it's not just about the physicality that happens as a result of sleeping regularly. There's all this internal stuff that's happening that's super beneficial, especially to children.
Definitely.
One of the things I will say is that every family is different and every child presents differently. And that's part of the work that I find really very interesting. I can have a family who has a food responsive child. I can have a family who has a child with ADHD and has impulse control around food. I can have a family who is super, super healthy, but somehow the portion sizes and the frequency of access to food has gotten off track. I can have a family that wants to be active, but they think they're active, but they're really not active, right? So there's and oftentimes families come with 3 or 4, 5 things that we can work on. And again, a lot of parents come to the table with this issue and they have their own baggage, but they also don't have quite the knowledge around nutrition and might not have ever heard about feeding and have no idea how eating habits are established. And so there's a lot of good work that can be done. And that's, I think, where the confidence builds, because a lot of people think, oh, if I just had the right diet, if I just had, if I just didn't eat that ice cream or have all those snacks, things would be different. and they
Mhm.
really focus on the food. And I need you to give me a healthy diet. I need a meal plan so I can do this. And I sit there and I have like a little chuckle on the inside because I'm like, oh, by the time I'm done with you, you're going to see it so much more than extra ice cream or a meal plan.
Yes, yes. I'm sure you're like, oh, that's cute.
I'm like,
And well, I'm gonna like, wait till I get done with you.
yeah.
Um, yeah, for my sweet food responsive child, her pediatrician sent her to a dietitian who, did her level best, but was basically
Mhm.
conveying just portion size and nutrient information.
Mhm.
Um, and it was only like one meeting. And I feel like, I mean, that's just an afternoon lost, basically.
It's
She was like
yeah,
9 years old and
yeah,
she's not getting this info. And if she is, she's probably filing it away in a place of self-criticism or concern, you
right.
know? And we have to talk about like that weight-based bias that's happening to kids at school as we
Yes,
live in a culture full of stigma.
absolutely. And I didn't overtly state this, but I don't work with the children. I work with the
Mm.
parents because I don't want to stigmatize a child. I don't want a child to come to me and be like, oh, I have to go see the dietitian. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my body. There's something wrong with what
Yeah.
I eat, what I like. I don't want anything to do with that. I really don't. Like, I feel like I can have an effect on the parenting piece of it. That and I don't think that the parents have to talk about weight and food and things of that nature. Just really setting up the environment and modeling and having boundaries, which a lot of
Yeah.
parents are challenged by these days. Saying no is very hard. So equipping parents with, their parenting, their food parenting strategies and toolbox is really what I see rewarding for
Yeah.
myself and effective for them.
As a
But
person entering this field of medicine, at this late stage of my career, one of my primary first messages is it is not only okay, but it is preferable to have the first visit without the child present because they do not need to hear all of the parents' distressed thoughts
mm-mm,
about their growth, their size, their habits around food. They don't need to be exposed to that processing.
mm-mm,
That processing needs to be done on their behalf, but not in the same visit where their ears are.
right.
Like I would rather, and one of the primary principles is asking, if it is okay to talk about someone's weight. And I would even take it back one step further. Is it okay today if we talk about your health as
Mm-hmm,
it relates to your weight? Can
mm-hmm.
we just like take the focus 1 degree off even more?
Or even, can we talk about your health?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think, and you tell me what you think about this, Chrissy, but we've intricately tied weight and health together, and
Mhm.
it's not always tied together.
Right. Right. We have healthy people in large bodies and unhealthy people in thin bodies. They both
Exactly.
absolutely exist. It's not
Excellent.
one to one.
Exactly.
And we also know that there is a very strong correlation with carrying lots of excess weight and a bunch of disease states. So opening
Correct.
the field to multiple truths at one time. Fat
Yes.
does not equate unhealthy across the board, nor does
Mm-hmm.
thin equate healthy. But we do need to acknowledge the important overlap in the Venn diagram and
Sure.
address that supportively.
Sure. Absolutely. And I think that, getting curious and not making assumptions. You mentioned weight stigma. And a lot of the weight stigma comes from just making an assumption. I see a person with extra body fat and I assume they're not healthy. I see
Yeah.
a larger bodied child and, oh, that parent must not have their act together. And that child must be unhealthy. These are biases and they cause a
Yes.
lot of harm. And so, even taking, stepping back and just being curious, there's a lot of pieces of information that we can talk about and discover and learn about a person before we make an assumption or a label about their
Yes.
health.
Or assuming we know anything about their dietary habits based on their body size.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We don't. We
Nope,
do not.
not at all. We have to
Stay
ask.
curious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I am so grateful to have this conversation and just, get to dive into this topic that we are both very, very passionate about. What is giving you hope about how this next generation is going to approach these things differently?
Well, my hope is, I have 4 young adults right now, and they question everything, and I love that. They really aren't buying on a lot of levels the social norms that I think we did when we were younger. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, that gives me a lot of hope. And I'm seeing a lot of young mothers who are very intentional and conscientious about how and what they feed their children. Now, I
And I'll
also
put a
see
plug
some
in
that
for
are
fathers too.
and fathers too. And I will say that I do see some that take it a little bit too far and are too worried about it, um, and too rigid about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always feel like flexibility is the goal here because nobody's going to be perfect on one end or the other. It's just like, how do
Absolutely.
you ping pong like a ball? How do you rebound back and forth from either end of
Yes.
the court?
Yes. Yes. In our house, it's boba. We love the boba. Issa loves the boba. She wants the boba. I'm like, we can have it once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Maybe once every 1 to 2 weeks. It's not a super more frequent than that situation, but
Mm-hmm.
it's got to be included. It's pleasure. It's
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? I was
Yeah.
sitting with another parent recently whose child, also like your young adults, is questioning everything. And they were talking about healthy habits and they were talking about health in general. And this young woman has already realized that healthy is often coded for thin.
Mm-hmm. She's
And
right.
she's like, not having it. I'm not
Yeah.
having it.
Yeah.
And I just
She's right.
celebrate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's flexibility with food too. I have families that I work with that their children have grown very accustomed to having multiple sweet treats a day, and how do you take that and get that down where you haven't completely eliminated it because these kids have grown used to having it several times a day. How do you create a new balance that works for everybody? And again, every family's going to be different, right?
Yeah.
And how children respond to the rules in the home, the food rules in the home is I'm also curious about as well. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah. Fewer food rules is better.
yeah, I think it's
Food
every
rules, but
family is
boundaries.
different. Yeah, boundaries,
Mhm.
systems, routines, structure, all of those things.
Structure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The book, my friends, is Kids Thrive at Every Size. Highly, highly recommend it as a resource. And Jill's practice can be found online at jillcastle.com. I am so grateful to just participate in reframing the topic of nourishing our children inside and out with you today, Jill. Any last thoughts and takeaways for our listeners?
Yeah, I think that as your whole podcast is about joy, and I just want to remind the listeners who may be parents or caretakers out there that there can be great joy in feeding our kids and raising them and
Mhm.
helping them establish lifestyle habits that really do help them be happy and healthy. And the joy is not in just telling our children what to do, but in participating with them in all of these lifestyle habits. It's great for the whole family. So
Yes.
don't lose the joy. I'm always trying to tell parents reclaim the joy, find the joy, because there is joyfulness. And even when it feels frustrating or scary or worrisome, we look for the joy in it because it's the connection, it's the communication, it's the cohesiveness of the family that will carry your child forward.
What a perfect message to end on. Thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to Jill Castle for this heart-centered and deeply human conversation about how we feed not just our children's bodies, but their confidence, curiosity, and joy. Her work reminds us that nourishment is emotional as much as it is nutritional, and that healing begins when we model self-compassion at the table and beyond. Next week, we'll explore another dimension of well-being with Dr. Ardashir Miran, psychologist, researcher, and creator of the Emotional Rights Framework. His approach invites us to see depression and anxiety not as flaws to fix, but as signals guiding us back to meaning, connection, and wholeness. It's a powerful conversation you won't want to miss. And if you're craving your own reset, the Physician Coaching Summit is right around the corner. In 2 short weeks, join us November 6th through 8th at Savannah Wellness Resort and Spa in Carefree, Arizona for a CME-accredited weekend of restoration, learning, and connection, with an optional full moon yoga nidra on November 5th to start your experience off. As always, a gentle reminder, I'm a doctor, but not your doctor. Nothing in this episode is intended as medical advice. Please consult your own trusted clinician. Special thanks as always to Kelsey, our fabulous producer, and my partner in life, Sue. May you care for your body, your mind, and your spirit with the same grace you offer others. See you next time on Solving for Joy.